Hi everyone and welcome back. I wanted to do this second part to the VO2 Max test video that I posted yesterday. If you haven't seen that video, it's in the description down below. This is going to show you how after doing a 2-mile test on your athletes, you can set up workout paces for them and why these are kind of the appropriate workout paces for the different areas you'd want to train a distance runner. So this is primarily focusing on, I'm working with 3,200 meter, 1,600 meter kids here in track. So that's the group that we're looking with here. So the way I usually do it is I just set up a spreadsheet and I can go back to the beginning of the season and go through all the different tests we have so I can kind of track progress. And that's where you'll kind of see where it says change in VO2 max, and you can kind of do this season to season or however you want to do it. But this is how I work it out because it's something I can very easily look at myself, and I can also post to different ways so that the kids can have it ready for them to know what their workout paces are supposed to be. So I've done a bunch of these already, but I'm going to do the last three here with you guys. So there's two main ways that you can set up these different workout paces, and then I'll talk about just a little bit the training dynamics in these different zones. So the first kid from the video, the one who finished first, is Jared. He ran 9:54. I like to keep track of their first mile and second mile time that you heard in the actual video itself, and I realized I have to change this. This was not that day. It was on January 6th. I like to keep track of this because those kids, if they're doing it exactly right, they're probably going to reverse split or even split. So Jared did a fantastic job of doing that. In fact, the more senior kids really did do that. Thomas, Jackson, David, who only is doing his second VO2 max tests, or third VO2 max test ever, is doing it fantastically. Manny basically even splitting. Amir and Ethan even splitting. Nia, who is a middle distance runner who's doing this, doing a fantastic job of this. Daniel also did it. We had some girls join the group here. Our school's doing something this year where we're having, we're not coaching anything by gender, we're doing it based on event. So some of these girls are new to this, so it was still kind of new to them to do it. So you might see a little bit of a lag on those names, although Lexi did a fantastic job of reverse splitting it. And before I talk about workout paces, I will note here, this young man, Lucas, has only been running for about 3 weeks also. Has no experience with other sports. He swam, but he didn't do any sports that really involved running. So I've really tried to slow play him. So I did a 1,600 meter test, and I used that time, and I can show you guys how to do that when we start calculating paces. If you have somebody who's very, very new to running, or maybe it's a like 400 meter runner or 800 meter runner that you're trying to get some data on, and you don't want them to do a true 2-mile test. But as you can see, that's the exception, not the rule here. In fact, this young man, Blake, had done a couple of mile tests and he moved up. This time it actually, it says that he subtracted 111 seconds. It's just because the mile test is not quite as reliable as doing a 2-mile test for these kids. So back to Jared here. If you were to go through and figure out what the pace is for this, you would find that the per mile pace was 4:57, and I just like to keep track of the progress, so he subtracted 4 seconds from the last time we did this. So what you would do is, the first training zone that you're looking for here is a heart rate zone of, actually it should be 120 to 150, but these are your easy and your long workouts. This is aerobic threshold, easy pace type running. So this is what we're going to calculate here first because it is the bread and butter of any distance runner's diet. So the one way that you can first do it is by just taking out a calculator. And what you would do is you try to figure out how many seconds here. So we're going to go 4 times 60, and we're going to add 57. So the average, the pace at which, or the velocity at which Jared reaches VO2 max is 4:57 or 297 seconds per mile. So we're looking at trying to get 65 to 70%. Actually, Jared being more of an advanced runner, I try and make it more right at 70% for him. So you would divide it by 0.7. And now we're dealing with something that has 424 seconds. So that's where his easy pace should be. But this doesn't do us any good, so we got to figure out what this is per mile. So I think the easiest way to do it is to subtract 360, because that's what 6-minute pace is, 360 seconds, and then figure out what's left over. So if I were to take out that, we've got 64 seconds left over. So Jared is going to be at an easy pace of 70% VO2 max at 7:04 pace. Even these kids that I try and narrow down the window, I'm going to give him a range of 7 flat to 7 5.05, but these are much more experienced runners, so they can hit that target a little bit more. Going back to this young man, David here, as I mentioned, he'd played basketball but never had done any competitive running before, so I give him the full range of 65 to 70%. Once they've been running for about a year or two, you can narrow that window down to 70% and have it be more of an effective workout for them. So, moving on to the next type of workout, you'll notice that these kids, again, the more seasoned kids that have the tighter window, I don't give them this moderate tempo range because it's just not as beneficial for them. There's a video down below that talks about lactic threshold running and why you would do different workouts with different kids. And after they've been running for about a year or two, this is just, basically, it's too fast to be a longer recovery run, and it's not intense enough to be lactic threshold development, the next one we're going to talk about. But these other kids here, you'll find that less experienced runners, their lactic threshold, or the pace at which the lactic acid stops accumulating, or a tempo pace, might be much, much lower just because they haven't built up body infrastructures yet to supply the oxygen. So I give those kids that range. So we're going to skip moderate tempo, which is 78 to 82% VO2 max for Jared, and go right to a hard tempo workout or a lactic threshold workout, which is really at 85% VO2 max. But I like to give them this window here to kind of play around with. So if we were to go back with Jared and say that, again, 4 times 60 plus 57 to deal with the 297 seconds, you would divide by 0.84. And in this case, we have a time that's under 360 seconds because he's a much more advanced kid. So you would say that basically, okay, so 360 seconds would be right at 6-minute pace. So he needs to be at this pace at 5:53. So you would kind of go back and reset 4 times 60 plus 57. And I'll just remember for next time it is 297. We're going to divide that now by 0.86. And this is going to be faster, so this number is going to be a little bit faster. So he needs to be between 5:45 and 5:53 to be training this correct training zone. And there's a video down below that talks about why you would do this with your runners, as well as with your aerobic threshold or easy pace. Now, aerobic power or VO2 max intervals. I've got a bunch of videos on this. This is critically important for a distance runner to be placed right at VO2 max regularly. This workout, VO2 max test, replaces a VO2 max interval workout, but you really want to have this in a distance runner's diet basically every cycle. Early on, a little bit more when the intensity is low before they're fully in shape, and then however you do your cycles later on. I think a longer 9-day cycle versus a week is better. But however you do it, this needs to be a regular thing. So again, we're at 297 seconds. We're going to divide by 0.98, very close to his 2-mile pace. And we're going to get 303 seconds. So 300 seconds is how many his 5-minute pace is. So we're going to have a range of 5. That's not right. 5:03. 5:03.2. If we go back to 297, we will divide by 1.01 to get 101%, and we're now dealing with a time that's obviously faster than his VO2 max, so we're dealing with 4:54. So when you're setting up interval workouts for this kid, this is the range I'm going to give him on either thousands or 1200s, or maybe I drop down to 800s or something like that. That's a lot of math, but that's the way that you would do it if you're just dealing with the pure numbers. There's also a couple of really nice websites that I actually go to myself that I'm going to show you guys here. The first one, the pace calculator, most distance coaches know about this, where you can plug in, for example, if we're going to deal with here Thomas, who is our second runner, if I want to figure out what his per mile pace, and it's not a nice even number like his is, 10:21, you just put that in and you can calculate out, we've got 5:21, so he reaches VO2 max, so the velocity is at 5:21, 3 seconds faster than last time. So then I would go over here. And this website, if you just type in time percentage calculator, in fact, let me go back to a search bar. Time percentage calculator, right here, you're going to click into, and this will do all that math I was just showing you on the calculator. In the first line, you're going to put whatever the 100% is. So in Thomas's case, it's going to be 5:21. And so we're trying to get what the percentage is, so we're going to leave the second line blank and go down here. And I'm going to put 70% in for Thomas because I'm trying to figure out his long aerobic threshold recovery pace. and I'm going to get 738. So as I mentioned, I try to give him a range for these kids. So I'm going to say for Thomas, he should be between 740 and 735, and it would be the exact same thing if you were to put that in to the calculator. And just to prove that to you, I'm going to pull a calculator back up and show you how we can do it here with Thomas, the old-fashioned way, to show you that that actually does work. So 5 times 60 plus 21. We have 321 seconds, right? 300 is 5-minute pace. I didn't even need to do the math on that. So what we're going to do is we're going to divide by 0.7, and we've got 358 seconds. So let's subtract 360, because that is going to be 6-minute pace, and we're dealing with 98 seconds here, so we're dealing with 98 seconds here. So if you were to go through and add in the additional time that we're looking with, this would be where you would want this kid to be, which is 7-minute pace. If you subtract the 60, the additional time that you're dealing with here is 38. So as I mentioned, 38 seconds, 738. So I gave them that little bit of a range there. So it's the exact same thing that we were dealing with. So I'm going to do it here the rest of the way with this time percentage calculator website, which is very, very easy to work with. So just like with Jared, Thomas has been running. He is a junior. He's been with us for 3 years. So I'm going to skip moderate tempo, and we're going to go to 84% to get his hard tempo pace. And we're dealing with 622. Come on back here and give him 86%. Really what we're looking for is 85%, but I think you need to give him a little bit of a window even for these kids to hit their times correctly. So we're dealing with a range of 622 to 613. Coming back for the all-important aerobic power range for him, we've got 527, 2, and we're obviously going to get a time that's faster than his VO2 max, 517. So as you can see, that takes a lot less effort than doing it with the calculator, but for those of you guys that maybe want to do it that way or just to know how to do it, that's exactly the way you would. So now we're going to deal with Jackson here. He's 522 VO2 max, minus 4 seconds from the last time we did it. So you just pump that up 1 and go to 70%. And Jackson's at 740. Now, this is a little bit, I probably should effectively go 740 to 745 because easier is better. These two kids work really, really well together, and this is so close, so I'm just going to give them the exact same aerobic threshold workout pace. It's close enough for it to be there. Skip over because he's been running here with us for 4 years. Now we're going to go with the hard tempo lactic threshold workout. We're dealing with 623. 2, and it's probably going to end up being 614, just thinking about how the numbers work out. A second off where Thomas is. Not always, and a little bit, you can kind of shorthand it when it gets that close, but sometimes it ends up just by the pure math being a little bit more separated. These kids are going to do their tempo runs together, obviously. And for the all-important aerobic power workout, he is going to probably be 518 on this last one, just again by the way the numbers are, but like to check it myself. And yep, we are at 518. So that is the way you would do it with your kids as you're doing this, and you can kind of track progress. Okay, so these kids have been running for a long time, or these top ones, they're not going to be making huge jumps at this point, especially from where they are. You're going to see bigger jumps from kids that are, Manny's been running with us for a year. Danny's been running with us for only a year. You're just going to see bigger jumps, especially early in the season. This is the 4th time we've done it. I typically do a test every 2 weeks early in the season because you want to make sure that they're in the right training zone. Especially early on, they're going to make bigger jumps. Later on, and after this point in the season, so we're on January 6th, I'm going to start going to every 3 weeks just because it's not going to move as much. This is a great workout, but obviously 2 miles of 2-mile pace is sort of the shortest you would want to go. For a lot of times, you might want to do intervals because you can get, 3 or 4 miles worth of 2-mile pace by giving them that rest interval. So as I mentioned, down below there is a list of videos that you guys can take a look at about aerobic threshold, why you would do this, and lactic threshold running, why you would do those, and aerobic power, why all these aerobic paces are where they are. But this is really the way that makes it very simple. You're not guessing with the kids. This comes straight from the USATF coaching curriculum on aerobic training. This is a really good liberating way of not just guessing at your workout paces. Now, some people are fantastic at this. In fact, there's a coach in our county here who has multiple state championships, both individually and team-wise, and he does it on field, but in talking to him quite often, you'll find these numbers line up. He just has a really good feel for what the numbers will actually tell you should be. So this is, again, a great way of knowing where your runner should be at that point in time, and just not over or under training them. So that's why you would want to do this. Later on in the season, you can do it from 2-mile races. And as I mentioned, from Lucas here, before I forget, this is a mile. If you have a mile race on somebody, you can get really good data too. It's not VO2 max training, so it's not aerobic power development, as we mentioned, this really important training stimulus. Again, I would recommend looking at the video down in the description below on that. But you can tell about where they are. It's not nearly as reliable, but you can get some idea of where they are. So the way you would do that, because a human runs their mile anywhere from 110 to 112% of their current VO2 max. Jared, as a very well-developed distance runner, is going to be more at 110% because he's getting less of his energy from his anaerobic system. Nia here, who is a middle distance girl, is probably going to be more at 112% because she's going to get more energy from the anaerobic system. So you kind of have to play a little bit of guesswork here. But Lucas being so new to running, I'm going to guess that he's going to be at that 112% window. Actually, I think I put that he was actually at 114% because he is just still so new to running. So what you would do is you would put the actual mile time in here. So he went 8:37. So I'm going to put 8:37 now in the bottom line too, because this is the percentage and we're trying to get the 100% of it. So if you go in here and you put 114%, we should come across with, yep, 949. So that's another way you can do it. You can go back and do the math on it too, where you multiply it by the decimal points and all that to get the right number, but that's the way that you would do it. If I were to go through and have Jared run his fastest mile, I would go 110%, and a middle distance runner like Nia, I would do more 112%, just to get that more accurate. You would not want to go too long without doing this, but say you go through to a meet and there's limitations on entries, and maybe we go through and I'm like, all right, Jared, Thomas, Jackson, you guys are doing 3,200 meter. David, Manny, and Amir, I'm going to have you guys run the mile today. I can still go and get new data on them, and for the next week, before we do another VO2 max test, a 2-mile test, I can bring their training targets down to where they are from that point because they've made some improvements, just like these kids hopefully would have also. So that's the way that you can kind of look at it. So if you like this video, please think about subscribing or liking the video itself. If you have any questions, please ask them in the comments down below. And as I mentioned, there's some really nice accompanying videos about the different training targets down in the description. And until next time, this has been Coachy TV.